Craig, it's been an interesting few years for the IHSA between having to navigate through COVID to having to negotiate and move two of your bigger championship finals to different venues. We'll start with that aspect, and one that hits close with Champaign, getting to move the boys basketball finals back to the State Farm Center. From your perspective as executive director, how have you seen the first few years go with that championship back at the State Farm Center?
Well, they've been excellent. To be honest with you, we've had great attendance, improved attendance over years previous to COVID with our boys basketball tournament, and the atmosphere that we've been able to create there, modifying the tournament, but also being in that venue has really, I think, showcased our boys basketball tournament. So excited about the future of that, and we continue to talk about that while we're taking and receiving recommendations about how the tournament, while it's probably going to stay as a single weekend tournament, could be adjusted. And we're working obviously with the folks at the University of Illinois and the Convention and Visitors Bureau to look at what possibilities exist there. But yeah, we're incredibly excited about where our tournaments have transitioned to and look forward to the future.
Yeah, you mentioned some of that adjustments that could be made still to the product. What kind of feedback have you gotten from fans, and what are some things that you are considering about that weekend and how things could be made even better?
Yeah, so the feedback we've gotten has come from our schools primarily, and it has to do with generally having to play 2 games in a day for those that lose their semifinal game and then return and play the consolation game thereafter. So we're continuing to look at the schedule, and while there are a lot of games in 3 days, to see how those could be adjusted. But that's probably the thing we hear the most, and so we're continuing to look at what makes sense and what within the time limitations that we have, and trying to continue to maintain sessions and what that requires for breaking down the facility and then reticketing and bringing folks back into a new session. So all that has to be navigated and looked at very closely.
I know that you guys are now entering into the final year of the original agreement with the State Farm Center. For you, does the IHSA want to stay in Champaign, and do you foresee that being a strong possibility?
Yeah, I think we do, and we're starting to have those conversations right now. The 3-year contract was really based upon the change in our format, and so we are looking to do something with a little longer term, and so we're starting to have those conversations now. But I think our board of directors, who ultimately will make that decision, have felt good about the atmosphere and the experience there. So I think, as long as our conversations go well, and, we'll continue along that path to continue to showcase the university and our boys basketball tournament with it being there at State Farm Center.
Another huge weekend changing hands, this one from Champaign, at least every other year. We'll just first talk about football championships being played at Illinois State University in Normal, and just everything that went into that decision, because I know it was a long process for sure.
It was, yeah. We had that alternating year for a 10-year period, and actually with COVID, we extended it another year so that the University of Illinois could have an additional year. So that was a decision that the board kind of said, it's time to put the tournament in a singular location annually. And so, the University of Illinois couldn't meet that requirement, and we understood that. And so we think we've landed in a good place. The ISU has done great things with their facilities. They've added an indoor practice facility that'll be available in the fall. So all those things would trend to, we think, being able to be back at Illinois State University where that tournament actually began will be fun and exciting.
As far as those conversations with the University of Illinois, I know they wanted to make it happen. For you guys, it just seemed like getting that one weekend, not having to change it, and keeping that same weekend year to year was really important, and those things just didn't seem to match up with the University of Illinois.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that they didn't, and we just, we understood that there were some things that our board and our membership kind of desired, and so, we just decided that, the university came back with their very best offers and trying to look at, some days when they were going to host Northwestern that we could modify our tournament slightly, and that just wasn't in our membership's best interest. So, we've had a great relationship, continue to have a great relationship with a number of tournaments that go on at the University of Illinois, and so we're satisfied, and I think the University of Illinois has recognized, and they really do showcase our events when we come there, and so we're very appreciative of that.
Moving away from some of the championships now, I feel like you just had one of these conventions for this about refereeing and the ref shortage going on in the IHSA right now. For you, how do you think that the organization needs to attack that and handle that as things move forward and you look for more volunteers or people to help in these kinds of positions?
Yeah, that's a national trend, that it's been difficult to find folks that would give up their personal time to give back to a sport that they maybe played in the officiating ranks. And so we will just continue to push that narrative. Frankly, a very positive outcome of this last school year is that we were up 1,000 officials from the year before. And so coming out of COVID, and that's a very positive trend for us. And we've made some changes within our licensing of officials in hopes that it'll entice more to license, and some to current officials to license in more sports. And so we're trying to do those things to help our schools, because that's really where the burden is found, is by our local schools that don't have the officials to serve them. And so in support of them, we'll continue to do whatever we can do to encourage. And so any of those listening, it's a really simple process to license as an official. You can do it from our website. And we send you the rules books, and you take an online exam, take a clinic that will be available to learn. And we want to put people in the right position to be able to go out and do a good job. So all those things are in place, and so would encourage the listeners to really think about it, and contact a local officials association that they might find on our website to get more information, or contact our office directly.
From the outside, and maybe you have more perspective on this, it seems as though some of the officials just have been aging out, and that there's not as many younger officials joining. But being up 1,000 is an incredible amount, given how many positions that there are. Do you guys anticipate needing to see more like that year over year, or are you getting more to a comfortable level that's more sustainable?
No, we definitely need to see more growth. We know in some sports that football's a perfect example, where games are having to be moved off of Friday nights just because there aren't officials available. And that's the trend that we'd like to eliminate. So sport by sport and geographically, we are in a need and continue to be in a need. And so, again, we'll hope that folks will once they've, have their sons or daughters that are maybe no longer playing, that might give it a chance, and really encourage the young folks, even our high school students. We opened up a licensing opportunity to 15 and 16-year-olds this year in a developmental program, and they can license and work even at the high school level in underclass games, and that's a great experience. So those that have a sport interest, and even while they're playing, can get involved and make a little extra money through officiating.
Yeah. Speaking of those positions, we can transition to something that was new this past year for basketball season, but only partially, the shot clock being used in some shootouts in some tournaments. What is the feedback that you've heard from membership schools about how that is went? Because it was an entirely new experience for people and schools that were able to even get that shot clock technology implemented into their schools.
Yeah, we surveyed all of those schools that made that choice, and we did do it, as you mentioned, in tournaments and shootouts only. And I think there was generally positive feedback about it, and I think that was a result of, in many cases where it was being used, we had other licensed officials running the shot clock, so obviously they were very aware of the rules, knew when to reset it or when not to. It went well, and so as a result, we're going to continue to allow that same opportunity next school year. We haven't advanced it beyond those limited opportunities for our schools, and we'll continue to get feedback. We found that the majority of our tournaments and shootouts were boys events and our bigger school boys events. And so to get better feedback, we're hopeful, again, those who are interested, to maybe have some of our girls tournaments and or some of our smaller schools, maybe where they're hosting tournaments or shootouts, make use of it so we can get some feedback from those schools. So anyway, there's more to learn, of course, and we haven't set a trajectory of when timeline. There might be a full adoption and kind of waiting to see.
For sure. And not to project too far, you say that this year is going to be about the same as it was last year. For you, how do you think the adaptation of this and implementation of this in the future could evolve and could change as maybe more schools start being able to afford this technology and get this technology implemented into their gyms?
Well, we could do what Iowa did, which is just fully implement it and, require the schools to get them and install them. And we just didn't feel like there was a timeline that made sense for us. The number of our schools, so many gyms that some of our schools have that play a lot of, multiple levels of contests. So it's going to take time, and we're open to, if that becomes the interest of our membership, that's the direction we need to go for that sport, then we'll be open to the conversation. But we feel like we're in a good place now that we're allowing, again, to get some feedback, to allow schools to make use of it and get a feel for it. I'll add to that the feedback generally was that, they didn't really notice, and that the shot clock didn't go off a lot, but the end of the game format and procedure was different for coaching. And where there might be more fouling when there wasn't the shot clock, they could wait. And we see that in other levels of sport where they have the shot clock. And so no surprise that was instituted in these games where we're having the shot clock. So we'll continue to monitor that.
Having to deal with COVID and the financial burden, you mentioned that you guys were looking at a loss, but how are things looking now? 2 years removed from that, is the IHSA in better footing, at least financially?
Yeah, we're in much better footing, thank goodness, and that really is because of the support of our member schools and the great attendance that we've had at our state series events at all levels, because that's really how we make our revenue to survive here as an association. So, during COVID, we actually implemented a fee structure for our schools, a membership fee, and an assessment, and we're thankfully away from that, and we only had to do that for a year. We're able to actually give part of that money back to our schools. So that trend has been much better, and so we're thankful that the schools kind of bailed us out during a really challenging time, and feel confident with what we're offering, and again, that the attendance is back, and people are coming out to watch, because it's exciting to see the level of competition that our student athletes can compete at. And nothing like, we feel like we're the last really amateur sport now that, NIL has been instituted at the collegiate level, and the transfer portal and all that goes on there. So, high school sports still are exciting to be around and to have oversight of, in our role here at the association. So much better financially.
For sure. How bad did it get as far as your guys' end? I think last time you had said it wasn't necessarily seven figures, but the number was certainly one that you had to come up with these plans to overcome and make sure you guys survive.
Yeah, so our deficit that we were looking at was probably $500,000, and so that we instituted a request from our membership in terms of an assessment that basically got us that amount of money to help us survive. We took out a loan or a security from a bank in potential that we would have to borrow money. Thank goodness we did it, and that again was the result of the membership, and then things trending back quickly enough that we got ourselves in a better position. So feeling good about where we're at now, and hope, barring anything else crazy to happen again, that we'll continue on a good path.
Getting away from just the financial situation, COVID had a lot of implications for what was happening on the field, as far as having to cancel championships and trying to squeeze 3 different seasons into one half of a calendar year. Looking back now, what did you feel like that you learned from that experience? And is there anything that you still think about as, I wish we could have done this differently or would have done this differently? It's easy to look back in 2020, but now that where the IHSA is, how do you look back at that time?
Well, I look back at it and hope I never have to do it again, first of all. But in reflection, I think as an association, with the limits that we had within our state, I think we did just about everything we could do. Sure, there's things that you might tweak here or there. We went into a position and really it became a political thing, kind of. And that was frustrating, of course. But I think with the limits we had, we really we tried to push all the buttons that we thought we could that maybe help us get back sooner, we just went with the timeline that was, state government was going to allow us to return, and so I don't know that we could have done anything differently. Had we tried to do more sooner, I think the pushback would have, maybe been more burdensome had we tried to push it, quicker than what the state was telling us we should move forward. So it was an incredibly challenging time, and it felt badly for the student athletes in particular. But we're thankful that we're out of it and look forward to much better and greater opportunities for students going forward.
As weird as it sounds, because of how stressful and tenuous that time was, is there anything that you can take from just having to navigate the IHSA through that time that you can use moving forward, that you learned moving forward? Like I said, hopefully we don't have to ever go through anything like that again, but is there something in particular that you learned through that process?
Well, yeah, I learned that, the communication was key with a number of state offices. We communicated with the deputy governor. We communicated, while not very often, but we did communicate at times, with the Illinois State Department of Health and IDPH. And so all of those different groups, you had to discover. And so we created some opportunities and some communications with those groups. And, should something happen again, or we have to navigate, at least we know, folks in those offices and know ways at which we can communicate. So I guess, having gone through that, we've now know different folks in different parts of those offices and know the lines of communication that we could navigate should we have to.
How strong is the standing of the IHSA now moving into 2023, 2024, and another hopefully exciting season?
Yeah, I think we're in a great spot. Honestly, we're trending financially in a good direction. Our membership growth has continued. Opportunities for students and participation levels continue to grow. So we're looking now at girls flag football as a growing sport and emerging sport, along with a couple of others. So we want to offer opportunities, provide opportunities for students where there's interest within our membership, and so we'll continue to look at that. But all things are trending well. We're really excited about the fall upcoming and seeing new levels of opportunities and kids being able to participate.
All right, Craig, thanks so much. Here's to another exciting season.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Andy.